This is Ken Latham from Coffee Crafters, and today we're with one of our roasters, Brian Gum from Ross Street Roasting, and we're also with Danny Hall, who is the developer of the Roastmaster app. And I've wanted to do a video for a long time on how to use the BlueTherm Duo that we have and the Roastmaster app together to do profiling on the machine. And so rather than me trying to fumble through it, I'm going to let some experts take it and run with it and describe how the system works. So we'll start with Brian Gum, our roaster, and he can explain how he's using it.
All right. Thanks, Ken. And happy to talk about both of these things, the Artisan 6M and the Roastmaster app, using the BlueTherm Duo device, because I've been doing that now for about 6 months, and I got everything hooked up all at once. So the day I started roasting on the Artisan 6M was also the day I started logging roast data onto Roastmaster through the BlueTherm Duo device. And I unfortunately don't have the physical BlueTherm Duo device with me right now, but I'm going to show a quick picture of that. And this is simply the product page on the manufacturer's website for the BlueTherm Duo. This is a Bluetooth device that you plug a thermocouple probe into, and then it communicates temperature data wirelessly over Bluetooth to your iPad. And so you have your iPad here. You have the Roastmaster app on there, and Roastmaster is set up to communicate with that device, and we'll talk more about that. And once you've got all that stuff hooked up and going, I've found that the combo is very powerful. I mean, it's kind of it's taken me from what I'm not a professional expert roaster yet by any stretch, even though I'm starting my roasting company and all that good stuff. But I feel like using Roastmaster with the Artisan has really quickly upped my game in terms of my work getting into, especially the specialty coffee roasting world, where profiling is a very important part of the process, because you're trying to treat each coffee that you have uniquely and appropriately for the type of bean that you're working with, the kind of processing that underwent, and the kind of flavor profile that you're shooting for in your roast. And so without the Roastmaster app or the BlueTherm Duo device or devices like it, it would be very hard to do that. So I've really appreciated that. So I've shown what and I also unfortunately can't show how this all hooks up to the roaster because I'm in my home office, not in my roasting facility. It would be very hard to record a good quality audio recording if that thing was going anyway. But so again, to kind of give you a picture of how it all fits together, and actually, Ken, I might pull up, if I can find one right quick, a picture of the roaster. All right, so I'm going to show a quick picture of the Artisan 6M, which is the model that I'm roasting with. So here you see the three main units of the roaster, and the one in the middle with the hopper on top is where the BlueTherm connects and the thermocouple goes in. So right here where this device, which comes with the roaster, is mounted, that is where I have mounted my BlueTherm Duo, and the thermocouple probe runs via a wire into the hopper, and it mounts in a bracket that's right about there. And that reads the temperature data, sends it to the device, and then I usually have my iPad sitting over here, and so it's receiving all that data as the roast is proceeding. And stop my share here. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the iPad screen with the Roastmaster app pulled up, and so we can take a quick look at how that looks in the Roastmaster app. What we're looking at here is the home screen of the Roastmaster app, and across the bottom are the buttons to get you into the main pieces of functionality for the app. The first button there to the right of the home button is the beans menu, and this allows a very robust green coffee inventory control system. This is where the master record of my green coffee inventory lives. And that inventory data is linked to any of the roasts that you've done. And it'll also, and the two others being blends and cuppings, I won't talk about those because I don't use them yet, but those are there. The main thing I want to show here is the roasts, which here you can see the last time I roasted on the 18th of December, I had a number of roasts that particular day. And if I choose the last one that I did, which was the Yirgacheffe, this is a dry process coffee. And if I select that, it brings up the roast profile as it was captured by the BlueTherm Duo device, sending that information to Roastmaster, which was logging it. Also, Roastmaster captures the timing information. And you can enter in other information down below after the roast, such as this particular roast came out at a City Plus level, and it lost 12.84% of its weight. So those, that kind of information for me is really important in tracking my inventory over time as orders come in. So I'm always sure to make sure to weigh my green coffee and then weigh the roasted coffee right after the roast and capture that information, because it's helpful to have, and you can access it easily through the reporting functionality in Roastmaster.
Hi, my name's Danny Hall. I'm the developer of Roastmaster for iPad and iPhone, and we want to give you a really quick introduction to how to capture temperature data with your iPad and either a BlueTherm Duo or a Fidget's thermocouple hardware setup. All right, today we want to take a quick look at how to wire a thermocouple wirelessly to your roaster and capture the temperature data of your beans throughout the roast. Now, Roastmaster supports a number of different thermocouples. Two of the most popular are Fidget's and the BlueTherm Duo. Defining a probe is very simple in Roastmaster. In Utilities, tap Probes, tap the plus button, and add the probe type. Now, if I had the probe here wired and turned on, we would see a link there. We just set our port and hit save, and that's all there is to it. Within a roast, back in the roast panel, we can go ahead and add a new roast. Just tap the plus button, and we want to assign the items we're going to roast. In this case, let's say Colombian Supremo, good old go-to. And our roasted weight, and this is important not only for inventory tracking, but for a lot of the reporting features of Roastmaster, where you can look at what the weight does to your turnaround time, to your overall roast duration, first crack, second crack, all those good data points. So we're going to set 2 pounds, and in an introductory level workflow, at this point, you would over here tap the curves button, define a curve, and set it to a reading curve, binding it to whatever probe you have hooked up and wired to your roaster. At that point, if your probe was ready for action, you'd see a little green button here under the console display, and you could tap it and start going. I don't have, and as Brian pointed out, you wouldn't want a roaster running next to a video shot. So we'll just pretend that it's there. But once you do have everything up and running, what you're going to end up with is a graph of note points. Now, throughout the roast, you'll be able to monitor the temperatures as they change. Roastmaster gives you several tools to predict temperatures, such as the differential temperature projection. Those are only applicable in a live roast. And you also have delta curve options, so you can monitor the rate of rise of each individual probe that you have attached. You can set crack information as the roast progresses, and you can even configure nice little events that will fire based on temperatures as you roast. Now, this is all temperature related data. What you can also do is set up control data. And I'll go back to some roast on my sample roaster, where I have control data defined. All right, here we go. What we have here are control curves, one for heat and one for fan. Now these are the rough templates for what I do on my sample quest roaster to achieve the temperature curves that I'm after. You can see I didn't do really well on this one, but for instance, I start out at full throttle heat at 15, then about a minute or so in, I back it off once turnaround is getting close, and then I kind of jockey it as I go to stay in line with my temperature curves. You may roast entirely by control curves in Roastmaster if you like, but what we're looking at today is the ability to actually stay on track with a target temperature curve as you roast. Now, Roastmaster gives you a couple of different ways to do this. The most basic way, and probably one of the most favorite ways of a lot of the legacy users, is to actually come into your roast console, and down here in the little selector strip, you can enable the selector criteria. And in this case, we'll match roasts that are roasted with this particular roaster and this particular bean. We can see we have 5 showing up in our library. And if we go into the analyzer to actually perform the roast, we could go to past roast targeting mode, and we can swipe our finger along the bottom axis and take a look at all of these different roasts and the individual temperature data for that roast. So as we're going, we can make adjustments as we need to stay on track and make sure that our top temperature curve here matches what we're targeting on our past roast here. Now, once your roast is complete, then you can decide, okay, this is great, but I don't want to spend the time setting up all of my curves each time I roast. I don't want to spend the time trying to find a roast. I've got a good roast here that I know worked out well. I like the taste. I like the way that all the events fired during the roast. So I'm going to take this roast and turn it into a profile. It's very easy to do in Roastmaster. You simply tap the action button up here, swipe over, choose create profile from this roast. Now, Roastmaster sees that you have 2 individual curves that you've created in this roast. You have bean mass and exhaust. You can choose the ones that you want to include for targeting. There, tap done. And then it's going to ask you about curve templates. Now, curve templates are simply Roastmaster's way of speeding up your workflow. And what they do is when you have a curve template included in a profile, it's going to automatically make brand new curves for the purpose of recording data in your roast. So you can say, with all my roast, I actually want to record new data for bean mass and for exhaust, and tap done. And what Roastmaster gives us is our 2 target curves we want to match here. And it's telling us we're going to also be receiving brand new curve templates in roast that use this profile. So we will give it a good name. We might call this, we'll call this African. I can't remember what bean I came from. African save. And then when we go to create a new roast, all that we have to do with our roaster selected is to choose the profile, choose African, save the roast. Now, if our thermocouple was wired up and ready to receive data, the little start button here would be green. We just tap it and away we would go. But in this case, we don't have it hooked up, so we're just going to take a look at what we get here in the analyzer. Now, the last time we used this, we were in past roast targeting mode. So we'll tap the targeting button here in the upper right, switch over to profile program targeting mode. And you can see we have our target temperature data curve here. And I also like to track exhaust, so we have our target exhaust curve here. Now our 2 new curves are down here, not currently reading anything, but they're there, and we can see that in our bean temp curve, all the events that were defined in that curve are here waiting to report and alert us when those temperatures have been reached. So once we get to this screen, all we really have to do is press the start button here and we're good to go. So the advanced workflow in Roastmaster, and capturing as many data points as you have probe hardware for. Roastmaster doesn't impose a limit on the number of probes that you can put up. We simply create a roast.
Hi, thanks for calling Rainfront.
Choose our
Sorry,
profile.
we can't take your call right now. Please leave us a message.
And save, and we're ready. Roastmaster has our data collection curves here ready to go, and our reference curves here ready to go.
Cool. Danny, do you mind if I jump in on
No,
something?
not at all.
One thing I noticed, and would you mind, do you stop share? Now I can show, I dug up there we go. One thing I noticed when you were talking about the control curves that corresponded to like fan speed and heat controls, is that those are the two main controls that you also have on the Artisan 6M.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is show a photo right quick, and just dug this up from my collection. This is right after I got everything installed back in the summer. And so here you can see the iPad sitting on the chaff collector column right there. But then there's the BlueTherm Duo device. Now I have it mounted up there on that pedestal, but here it's sitting down there, and you can see the thermocouple wire that goes in there that's hooked up to the probe that's right about in there. And here are the two controls on the Artisan 6M. The top is watts, which corresponds to heat, and then the bottom is bean loft, which corresponds to fan speed, and that's how quickly or how much forced air is being run through the hopper. And so when you've got beans in here, the heated forced air goes up through there, and that's kind of the hallmark of the fluid bed design. And so to bring that back to Roastmaster, and this is not something I've set up now, but it sounded like those control curves you mentioned, like I can do the same thing because I do change the wattage throughout the roast depending on what I'm roasting. So like the Ethiopian, I'll kind of dry out for a long time, so the temperatures will be lower. And then as it gets close to first crack, I kind of dial up the heat a little bit to push it into first crack, kind of so I get a good solid first crack going. So I could set up a control curve on a profile for the Ethiopian Yirgacheffe that said, right about this time is when you do this on the Artisan. Is that kind of what I'm hearing you say?
Absolutely, you certainly could. And I would think in most specialty roaster situations that would be pretty viable, because I'd imagine every batch is the largest batch size you can handle. There aren't too many cases, I'd imagine, where you'd be roasting smaller batches. So yeah, you certainly could. But what I found that when you do want to actually break the batch size down, then the control curves become less valid.
Yeah.
That was part of the impetus for moving to an event type workflow where you could say at 160 Celsius, where I'm approaching first crack, I want to really back off the heat so that I can kind of slowly enter first crack, stretch it out just a little bit for my development, and then kind of kick the heat in later on. So events versus control curves are, probably used for the same purpose, to let you know when you want to accomplish something and how much.
Right.
But events have the benefit of being less weight dependent. So, if you're roasting, let's just say 1 kilo in a 2 kilo roaster, you're not going to want to put the heat all the way up where you might want to do that on a 2 kilo batch. Right. So, you can have that level of portability between different batch sizes.
Right.
Kind of two different ways to accomplish the same thing.
One of the things that I think you just covered a topic that's very important. People are saying, okay, that's fine, I got the device, how do I use it? One of the things you can do with the infinite heat control, because it is infinite, it's on a potentiometer that turns the wattage up and down. You could, once you establish a roast profile that you like, and let's say you establish that on a 6-pound roast, you can use that graph on a 1-pound roast, turning your wattage down, and then try to use that graph as the target. And you could target your current ramp up on the temperature. Because what we found is roasting a 1 pound batch, basically with that type of a strategy to the same ending bean temperature, you get basically the same results, but you could make it even closer if you use the Roastmaster app to guide you through that ramp up process. And I had one question for Danny. Danny, is there the ability within the app to save and send a profile to somebody so you could share it with another roaster?
Sure, sure. Mm-hmm.
That's a big deal, because what we would like to do is establish a user group, of our roasters where they can blog and talk to each other, but also share their, even supply a resource on the website once you log in, where you can download roast profiles and notes from different customers to use on the system. So that would be very helpful, and I was hoping you had the ability to do that. So that's a great feature.
Sure. Yeah, it's actually just a couple taps. You can save it to email, send it that way. You can save it to Dropbox and share it with other people that way. And if you have a device in the same room, you can just use AirDrop to send it right between the two devices.
Great. That's great.
And that's on a particular roast?
Roast, I don't allow that simply because it opens up a big can of worms. If, let's say, you had this great roast and you wanted to send me the roast, if I imported it into my library, then I would have to import your beans.
Yeah.
Now, that may be okay in a lot of situations, and a lot of situations it wouldn't, particularly shops with multiple roasters who might try to use that as kind of an ad hoc iCloud.
Yeah.
It would lead to a lot of inconsistencies in inventory and a lot of things popping up that people might not want listed in their inventory. So I chose to make the breakdown at the profile itself, because that will contain all of the curve data, all of the event data that you have to find for that program if you use events. It really does contain everything necessary for a roast. And in essence, you could take a roast, create a profile, and export that, and it's the same thing.
Right.
That's great. Yeah.
And I haven't made use of that particular functionality yet, but I do have a roaster friend out on the East Coast who he and I have done some profile sharing, but we're on different software platforms. So the way we've handled it is just like screenshots. So
Right.
just a good old fashioned screenshot on the iPad, and I just email it to him. But yeah, Danny, I didn't know you could do that with profiles. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's a big deal. We were wondering how to get this sharing thing started for the people that wanted to do it. So I think your app would work really good for that. And the profile is really all they need. They don't need the other stuff. They just need those data points and put it up there as a target to try to follow. Because that's something people could do without a lot of work. They could use that as a guideline in real time. So that's awesome. One of the things I'd like to leave people with is, and we'll put Danny's website, rainfroginc.com, right?
Yes.
Yeah, rainfroginc.com. We'll put that web address up there so that people can go, because on Danny's website, he's got videos, on how to do the different things, and those videos, as we know, are a great tool for people. But I'd really like to thank you guys for joining us today and talking about this profiling. And Danny, we're going to work our profiling system into our new larger roaster. Our new 12-pound roaster is coming out. And we'll probably put a mount right on the face of that roaster because it's an upright machine.
That sounds good.
And recommend that people use your profiling system. I did not know that it had all the capabilities that you explained, because I haven't actually used it, although we do recommend it to people. So I'm going to play with it some, because I think it'll be fun.
Well, Ken, I really can't thank you enough. It wasn't until Brian contacted me that I had any idea that you were out there. Now, I've seen his roaster before. He showed me pictures in past, I would say maybe almost a year ago now. But I had no idea you were out there plugging for me, so I really appreciate that.
No, it looks like it's a great app and a real inexpensive solution for people that want to do that. Because if you look at the other profiling things out there, they're very expensive. Yeah, so app's a great value. Great value.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. This is Ken Lathrop from Coffee Crafters, and we appreciate you watching our video.